Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is John, and I am an American storyteller. It is my sincere hope tonight to offer you a place of rest, a quiet harbor from the cares of the day. We will journey together into a story, but first, let us take a moment to become still, to allow the world outside to gently fade away, leaving only the sound of my voice and the comfort of your own breath. Tonight's story is about rain. Not the crashing, dramatic rain of a storm, but the gentle, steady, reassuring rain that whispers to the windows and coaxes the world into a state of quiet grace. It is the kind of rain that invites us to draw inward, to find warmth and safety, and to appreciate the small, simple comforts of a cozy shelter. Before we begin our tales, let us prepare for our journey into sleep. Find your most comfortable position, allowing your body to feel supported and heavy. Let your pillow cradle your head, and let your blankets be a soft, warm cloud around you. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. Nowhere to go, no obligations to fulfill. This time is for you alone. It is a gift of stillness you give to yourself. Let us begin our gentle descent into rest with a quiet countdown, sinking a little deeper with each number. 10. Take a slow, deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs, cool and clean. And as you exhale, release it with a soft sigh, letting go of the day that has passed. Imagine every thought, every worry, every list of things to do simply drifting away on that exhale like little paper boats on a calm, slow-moving stream. They float away, out of sight, and you are left here in this peaceful moment. 9. Bring your awareness to the weight of your body. Feel the gentle pressure where you connect with the surface beneath you. Feel the solid, unwavering support holding you completely. Give your weight over to it. There is no need to hold yourself up any longer. You are safe. You are supported. Allow yourself to feel heavy, grounded, and secure, like a smooth stone resting on the soft moss of a forest floor. 8. Let a wave of softness move over your face. Allow the tiny muscles around your eyes to release. Let your brow become smooth and wide. Unclench your jaw, letting your teeth part just slightly. Feel the stillness settle upon your expression, a look of serene calm. The mask you wear for the world can be set aside for the night. Here, there is only peace. 7. Let this feeling of release travel down into your neck and shoulders. We so often carry the weight of our responsibilities in this space. For now, let that weight dissolve. Feel your shoulders gently drop away from your ears, becoming heavy and loose. Imagine a gentle, warm hand resting on each shoulder, reassuring you that it is all right to let go. Everything is taken care of for now. 6. Allow this gentle wave of relaxation to flow down through your arms, all the way to the tips of your fingers. Your arms may feel heavy and warm. Your hands can rest, open, and soft. Let go of the need to hold on, to grasp, to control. For now, your hands have done their work. They can be still, resting peacefully at your sides or on your body, feeling the gentle rhythm of your breathing. 5. Bring your attention to your chest and your abdomen. Notice the gentle rise and fall with each breath you take. It is a steady, quiet rhythm, like the gentle tide of a peaceful sea, in and out. There is no need to change it, no need to force it. Simply observe this soft, natural movement. With each exhale, feel your torso soften a little more, sinking deeper into comfort, deeper into rest. 4. Feel the relaxation spreading through your lower back and your hips. releasing any tightness held there. This is the center of your stability, and now it can be soft and at ease. Imagine this area becoming warm and pliable, melting into the surface beneath you. Let go of any tension you might be holding, allowing your body to find its most natural and comfortable alignment. 3. This feeling of heavy, warm relaxation now flows down through your legs, through your thighs, your knees, your calves. Your legs have carried you through the day, and now they can rest completely. They feel wonderfully heavy, anchored and still. There's no need to move, no need to walk or run. Their only task now is to be at peace. 2. Let this final wave of softness reach your feet. Feel your ankles relax. Let your feet go limp, falling gently to the sides. The soles of your feet, which connect you to the ground all day long, can now be soft and free. Imagine all the remaining traces of the day's journey simply draining away from them, leaving them light and serene. 1. You are here now, in a state of profound stillness and quiet. Your body is heavy, your mind is calm, and your breath is a gentle, steady anchor. You are floating in a peaceful space between wakefulness and sleep. Allow my voice to be a gentle guide, leading you now into our story, into the soft and steady rhythm of the rain. Our first tale begins in a place where the land meets the sea, in a small cottage perched on a low, grassy cliff. The cottage was made of gray stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind and sea spray, and its roof was made of heavy, dark slate. From its 2 small windows, one could see the vast, churning expanse of the ocean on one side and the winding dirt path that led to the quiet fishing village on the other. This was the home of Silas, the lantern mender. Silas was a man as weathered and quiet as his home. His face was a map of gentle lines, etched by years of squinting into the sun and smiling into the wind. His hands, though gnarled with age, were steady and precise, for his work required a delicate touch. For as long as anyone in the village could remember, Silas had tended to the town's lanterns. He cared for the great beacon in the old lighthouse, and he mended the small brass carriage lamps that lined the cobbled streets of the village below. His days followed a simple, comforting rhythm. He would wake with the first pale light of dawn, make a pot of strong tea, and sit by the window, watching the sea change its colors from gray to blue to green. Then he would go to his workshop, a small, tidy room at the back of the cottage that smelled perpetually of metal polish, oil, and wood smoke from the little stove in the corner. On this particular day, the world outside was wrapped in a soft blanket of gray. A slow, steady rain had begun in the night, a rain so gentle it seemed to be more of a mist than a downpour. It fell without wind, straight down, hushing the world. The roar of the sea was softened to a distant, rhythmic sigh. The cry of the gulls was muted. The rain was a curtain, drawing the world into a smaller, cozier space. Silas sat at his workbench, a disassembled lantern before him. Its brass casing was dull with salt and time, and its glass panels were cloudy. He worked methodically, his movements unhurried and sure. He dipped a soft cloth into a tin of sweet-smelling polish and began to rub it onto the brass in slow, circular motions. As he worked, the metal began to glow with a deep, warm light of its own, reflecting the gentle gray light from the window like a small, captured sun. The only sounds in the workshop were the soft whisk of the cloth against the metal, the quiet crackle of the fire in the stove, and the persistent, gentle drumming of the rain on the slate roof. It was a sound Silas loved, a sound like 1,000 tiny, soft fingertips tapping a lullaby overhead. It made the warmth of his small workshop feel even more pronounced, a safe, golden bubble against the cool, damp world outside. He finished polishing the casing and set it aside. Next, he took the glass panels, one by one, and washed them in a basin of warm, soapy water. He dried them with a linen cloth until they were perfectly clear, free of any smudge or speck of dust. He held one up to the light, turning it this way and that, admiring the way it caught the faint light, a pane of invisible clarity. This was his art, his quiet contribution to the world, making sure the light could shine through, bright and true. As the afternoon began to wane, the gray light outside deepening into a soft twilight, Silas felt a familiar pang of hunger. He cleaned his hands, banked the fire in the workshop stove, and went into the main room of his cottage. He moved about the cozy space with the easy familiarity of long habit. He sliced a thick piece of dark bread, placed it on a plate with a wedge of sharp cheese, and poured himself a cup of the tea that was always warm on the hob. He sat in his worn armchair by the hearth, where a low fire glowed with embers like sleeping jewels. He ate his simple meal slowly, savoring each bite. Outside, the rain continued its steady, peaceful rhythm. The world felt very far away. There was only the fire, the rain, and the quiet contentment of a day's work done well. It was in these moments of profound stillness that Silas felt most at peace. As he finished his last bite of cheese, he heard a sound. It was not the rain, nor the fire, nor the sea. It was a faint, high-pitched cry, small and thin, almost lost in the sound of the falling water. He paused, his head tilted, listening. There it was again, a tiny, plaintive mewling. It seemed to be coming from just outside his front door. Curiosity, a gentle and infrequent visitor, stirred in him. He set his plate aside, rose from his chair, and walked to the heavy wooden door. He lifted the iron latch, and the door swung inward with a soft groan. A gust of cool, damp air, smelling of wet earth and salt, swirled into the warm room. And there, on his doorstep, huddled against the stone wall, was a tiny ball of fur. It was a kitten, no bigger than his hand. Its fur, a patchwork of black and gray, was soaked and matted, plastered to its thin frame. It shivered violently, its whole body trembling with cold and fear. It looked up at him with wide, green eyes, enormous in its small face, and let out another weak, desperate cry. It was the most forlorn and tiny creature Silas had ever seen. Without a second thought, he bent down, his old knees creaking in protest. He scooped up the little creature in his large, gentle hands. It was startlingly light, a fragile collection of bones and wet fur. It flinched at his touch, but was too weak to struggle. He brought it inside, closing the door against the rain and the growing dark. He carried the kitten over to the warmth of the hearth. He found an old, soft woolen cloth, one he used for the final buffing of his lanterns, and began to gently dry the shivering animal. The kitten trembled under his touch, its tiny heart beating like a trapped bird's wing against his palm. He spoke to it in a low, soothing voice, the way he sometimes spoke to the sea on a calm morning. "There now, little one. You are safe now. You are warm." He dried it as best he could, its fur beginning to fluff up into a soft, smoky cloud. It was still shivering, so he took an old wooden crate he used for kindling, lined it with more soft rags, and placed it close to the fire, but not too close. He gently set the kitten inside. It immediately curled into the tightest possible ball, a tiny knot of misery, and closed its eyes. Silas knew it needed more than just warmth. He went to his small pantry and found a saucer. He poured a small amount of milk into it, then added a little warm water from the kettle on the hob, just as he remembered his mother doing for the barn cats when he was a boy. He placed the saucer in the crate near the kitten's nose. At first, the kitten didn't move. It seemed exhausted beyond measure. But then, its nose twitched. It smelled the warmth of the milk. Slowly, hesitantly, it uncurled just a little. It stretched out its neck and touched its nose to the liquid. Then, with a tiny, lapping tongue, it began to drink. It drank for a long time, the soft, lapping sound a new and welcome addition to the quiet symphony of the cottage. When it had finished, it gave a tiny sigh and curled back into a ball, its shivering finally beginning to subside. Silas watched it for a long time, a strange and gentle feeling blooming in his chest. His life was one of solitude, a state he did not mind, for he had the sea and his work for company. But the presence of this small, vulnerable life in his home felt different. It was a small, warm weight in the quiet space of his evening. The rain continued to fall, a steady, comforting drumbeat on the roof. The fire crackled and hissed. The kitten slept, its breathing evening out into a soft, regular rhythm. Silas returned to his armchair, picking up a book he had been reading, but his eyes kept straying to the small crate by the fire. The world had shrunk to the size of this one room, a haven of warmth and light against the vast, gray, rainy dark. He must have drifted off to sleep in his chair, for he was awoken some time later by a faint, rough sensation against his hand, which was dangling by the side of the chair. He opened his eyes. The fire had burned down to a deep orange glow, and the room was filled with soft shadows. The kitten was there, standing on its wobbly legs, rubbing its cheek against his fingers. It looked up at him, and then a sound began in its tiny chest, a low, rumbling vibration that grew until it was a surprisingly loud purr. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated contentment. It had come to him, seeking not just warmth or food, but contact, trust. Silas smiled, a slow, deep smile that made the lines around his eyes crinkle. He gently stroked the kitten's back with one finger. Its fur was now dry and soft as dandelion fluff. The kitten, emboldened by his gentle touch, made a clumsy attempt to climb onto his lap. It scrambled up his leg, its tiny claws snagging harmlessly in the thick wool of his trousers. It finally tumbled into his lap, where it circled 3 times before settling down into a warm, purring heap. Silas rested his hand on its small, vibrating body. He did not pick up his book again. He simply sat there in the deep quiet of the rainy night with the small, warm weight of a new friend in his lap. He listened to the rain. He listened to the purr, and he felt a sense of peace so profound and complete that it seemed to fill every corner of his small cottage. The world outside could rain for a week, for a month, and it would not matter. Here, inside, everything was warm and everything was right. The lantern mender, in his quiet cottage by the sea, was no longer entirely alone. Our second tale takes us inland, to a valley nestled between ancient, slumbering mountains. The mountains were so old that their peaks had been worn down to gentle, rounded humps, and they were perpetually cloaked in a soft, green blanket of moss and ancient trees. A silver river, clear and cold, wound its way through the valley floor like a ribbon of forgotten moonlight. It was a place that felt untouched by the frantic pace of the world beyond. In this valley, in a cabin built of dark, fragrant cedar wood, lived a young woman named Ilara. Ilara was a map weaver. She did not chart coastlines or measure distances between cities. Her maps were of a different kind. She wove maps of feelings, of memories, of dreams. On her great wooden loom, she would weave the pattern of a joyful memory using threads of brilliant gold and sun yellow. She would capture the complex, tangled feeling of wistful nostalgia with threads of soft lavender, dusty rose, and muted gray. Her cabin was a sanctuary of color and texture. Skeins of yarn, dyed with pigments she made herself from berries, flowers, bark, and roots, hung from the rafters like sleeping rainbows. Spools of thread were arranged on shelves by color, creating a vibrant mosaic that covered an entire wall. The air within the cabin smelled of wool, dried herbs, and the faint, earthy scent of the dyes simmering on her small stove. Ilara loved her work. It was a quiet, meditative conversation between her hands and her heart. But for the past week she had felt a strange stillness within herself. She would sit before her loom, her hands resting on the smooth wood, and feel nothing. The vibrant threads seemed to mock her with their brightness. She would pick up a skein of deep, hopeful blue, but feel no hope. She would touch a strand of fiery, passionate red, but feel no passion. Her inner landscape had become a flat, colorless plain. It was then that the rain began. It was not a sudden storm, but a slow, deliberate arrival. The sky, which had been a pale, washed-out white for days, slowly deepened to the color of a dove's wing. Then the first drops began to fall, fat and slow, making dark, coin-sized spots on the dusty path outside her door. Soon, the drops merged into a steady, gentle shower that filled the valley with a continuous, soothing shush. For 3 days, the rain fell. It was a quiet, introspective rain. It dripped from the broad leaves of the ferns, slid down the slick bark of the birch trees, and fed the moss until it was a deep, velvety emerald. The river rose slightly, its song deepening from a tinkle to a low murmur. The mist in the mountains grew thicker, erasing the familiar peaks and wrapping the valley in a soft, gray embrace. Ilara found herself confined to the cabin. At first, she felt restless, trapped with her own creative emptiness. She would stand at the window for hours, watching the rain fall, her reflection a faint ghost on the glass. The world outside was a watercolor painting, its sharp edges blurred, its colors muted and soft. It was beautiful, but it felt as gray as her own mood. She tried to work, but her hands felt clumsy and her mind was blank. The loom stood silent in the center of the room, a patient, waiting friend she could not speak to. The vibrant threads seemed to shout at her, their colors too loud, too demanding for the quiet, gray world that now existed both outside her window and inside her heart. On the 4th day of the rain, she awoke with a different feeling. It was not inspiration, not yet, but a quiet sense of acceptance. She made herself a cup of mint tea, and instead of going to her loom, she pulled on her waterproof boots and a heavy cloak. She was not going to fight the gray stillness anymore. She was going to walk into it. Stepping outside was like stepping into another world. The air was cool and thick with the smell of damp earth, wet leaves, and clean stone. It was a smell that was alive and ancient. The sound of the rain was all-encompassing, a gentle, rhythmic patter on the hood of her cloak, a soft drumming on the forest floor, a delicate dripping from every leaf and branch. It was not one sound, but a symphony of 1,000 tiny, watery notes. She walked without a destination, following a small deer trail that led deeper into the woods. She paid attention to everything. She noticed the way the raindrops clung to the strands of a spider's web, turning it into a necklace of glittering jewels. She saw how the colors of the forest, which had seemed muted from her window, were actually deeper and richer in the rain. The green of the moss was more intense. The brown of the tree bark was darker and more complex. The gray of the wet stones was streaked with silver and black. She reached a small clearing where a great, ancient oak stood. She stood beneath its sprawling branches, partially sheltered from the rain, and looked. She truly looked. She saw the way the light filtered through the wet leaves, soft and diffuse, like the light in a cathedral. She listened. She heard the gurgle of a small new stream that the rain had created, the soft plop of water falling from a high branch into a puddle, the whisper of the wind moving through the wet canopy. A thought began to form in her mind, as quiet and gentle as the rain itself. She had been trying to weave with the colors of sun and fire while her world was made of water and mist. She had been trying to shout while the world was whispering. What if, she thought, she stopped trying to weave what she thought she should feel, and instead wove what was actually there? What if she made a map, not of a memory or a dream, but of this very rain? A flicker of something, not quite excitement, but a quiet, purposeful energy stirred within her. She turned and walked back to her cabin, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. When she arrived, she did not go to her wall of vibrant threads. Instead, she began to gather new materials. She took a basket and went back out into the gentle rain. She collected soft, gray-green moss from the base of the trees. She found a spider's web, abandoned and broken, and carefully gathered its silvery glistening strands. She collected fallen leaves, bark from a silver birch tree, and smooth gray pebbles from the riverbank. She filled a clay jar with pure, clean rainwater. Back inside her warm, dry cabin, she set to work. She put the rainwater on to boil with some of the dark, wet soil from her garden, creating a dye the color of a deep, stormy gray. She simmered bark and leaves to create subtle browns and muted greens. These were not the brilliant, joyful colors she was used to. They were quiet, complex, and earthy. They were the colors of the rain. She took undyed wool, silk, and linen and dipped them into her new dye pots. The threads that emerged were beautiful in their subtlety. There was the gray of a wet stone, the silver of a raindrop, the deep green of damp moss, the soft brown of a forest floor. She even found a spool of very fine, almost invisible thread, and decided it would represent the mist that shrouded the mountains. Finally, she approached her loom. This time she felt no emptiness. Her hands knew what to do. She warped the loom with the dark, soil-gray thread, creating her canvas. Then she began to weave. She did not have a pattern or a plan. She let her hands follow the memory of her walk in the woods. She wove with the soft, textured, mossy thread, creating patches that felt as soft and damp as the forest floor. She threaded the delicate, silvery strands of the spider's web through the fabric, catching the light from her lamp just as they had caught the raindrops. She used the birch bark-colored thread to create long, vertical lines that looked like tree trunks slick with rain. Her shuttle flew back and forth, its gentle clack-clack joining the rhythm of the rain against the window panes. She wove the sound of the rain, using tight, dense stitches for the steady drumming on the roof, and loose, open stitches for the delicate dripping from the leaves. She used the almost invisible thread to create swirling patterns of mist that seemed to float above the rest of the weaving. She worked for hours, losing all track of time. The world outside faded to black, but she lit her oil lamps, their warm, golden light making her cabin a cozy island in the night. The rain continued its soft, steady song. She was no longer just a weaver, she was a collaborator. She and the rain were creating this map together. When she finally cut the finished piece from the loom, she held it up in the lamplight. It was unlike anything she had ever made. It was not a map of a single bright emotion. It was a map of a mood, an atmosphere. It was a landscape of quiet and calm. It held the coolness of the air, the smell of the wet earth, the sound of the water, the peace of the valley shrouded in mist. Looking at it, she felt a profound sense of quiet joy. She had not conquered her creative stillness. She had embraced it. She had found beauty not in fighting the gray, but in exploring its infinite, subtle shades. She hung the new tapestry on her wall, and it seemed to absorb the quiet of the room and reflect it back, amplified. That night, Alara slept more deeply than she had in a long time. The rain still fell outside her window, a gentle, steady lullaby. But now it was not the sound of confinement. It was the sound of inspiration. It was the sound of a quiet, gentle friend who had reminded her that there is beauty and color to be found not just in the sunshine, but in the soft, steady, life-giving rain. Our third and final tale leads us to a town that seemed to move a little slower than the rest of the world. Its streets were paved with old, uneven cobblestones, and its buildings leaned into one another like old friends sharing a secret. At the very heart of this town, in the center of a quiet, circular square, stood a library. It was not a grand or imposing building. It was a round, two-story structure made of warm, honey-colored stone, with a domed roof of weathered copper that had long ago turned a soft sea green. This was the Whispering Archive, and its keeper was a man named Arthur. Arthur was as much a fixture of the library as the dusty books and the tall, arched windows. He was a man of gentle habits and quiet demeanor, with spectacles perched on the end of his nose and a tweed jacket that was always slightly rumpled. He had been the town's librarian for over 40 years, and he knew the library not as a collection of books, but as a living, breathing entity with its own moods and secrets. The library was called the Whispering Archive because its true treasures were not just the published books that lined the main floor. In the winding corridors of the second floor, and in the dusty, forgotten corners of the attic, it held the town's forgotten stories. Boxes of unsent letters, diaries filled with faded ink, photograph albums and journals of amateur botanists and stargazers. It was a library of whispers from the past. Like the Valley of the Map Weaver, this town was now under the spell of a long and gentle rain. It had been drizzling for what felt like an eternity, a fine, persistent mist that softened every edge and amplified every smell. The cobblestones glistened like polished jet, and the air smelled of wet stone and the sweet decay of autumn leaves. The whole town seemed to have pulled a gray blanket over its head and gone to sleep. The library was Arthur's sanctuary in this weather. The sound of the rain on the great copper dome was magnificent, a low, resonant hum that made the silence inside feel even more profound. On this particular rainy afternoon, the library was empty save for Arthur. He sat at his large oak desk, a cup of steaming cocoa in his hands, listening to the rain and the comfortable creaks and groans of the old building settling around him. It was in a moment of deep silence between the turning of a page and the sip of his cocoa that he heard it. A new sound, a sound that did not belong to the rain's gentle symphony. It was a tiny, rhythmic plink, plonk, plink. It was a very small sound, almost too faint to notice, but its perfect metronomic rhythm set it apart from the random patter of the rain. It was the sound of a single drop of water falling from a height and landing on something solid. Arthur took off his spectacles and polished them with a handkerchief, a sure sign that he was thinking. A leak. The old building was prone to them, but he hadn't had to chase one down in years. He listened again, turning his head, trying to pinpoint the direction of the sound. It seemed to be coming from above and from the back of the library, somewhere in the labyrinthine stacks of the second floor. With a soft sigh, not of annoyance but of gentle purpose, he pushed back his chair. The quest for the drip had begun. He took a small brass flashlight from his desk drawer, even though it was the middle of the afternoon, for he knew the corners of the library could be as dark as midnight. He climbed the spiraling wooden staircase, his soft-soled shoes making no sound on the treads. The air grew warmer and smelled more intensely of old paper and leather binding as he ascended. On the second floor, the bookshelves were arranged in a circular pattern, creating narrow, curving aisles that felt like secret passageways. The plink, plonk, was louder here, more distinct. He began his search, walking slowly down one of the aisles, his head tilted. The sound seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing strangely in the curved space. He ran his hand along the tops of the books, feeling for any dampness. He peered up at the high vaulted ceiling, but could see no obvious stain or crack in the old plaster. He moved from the history section to geography, then into poetry. The sound seemed to grow fainter, so he retraced his steps. It was a slow, methodical game of hide-and-seek. He felt not a shred of frustration. This was simply the library speaking to him, telling him it needed a small bit of attention, and he was happy to oblige. It was part of their long, quiet conversation. Finally, in a seldom visited section dedicated to obscure biographies, the sound was at its clearest. Plink, plonk. He looked up. High above the shelves, there was a small dark stain on the ceiling, no bigger than his hand, and from the center of it, a single fat drop of water was forming, glistening in the dim light before letting go and falling. He followed its path downward with his eyes. It was landing directly on the leather-bound top of a very large, very old encyclopedia. Arthur fetched a small stepladder and a bucket from a supply closet. He carefully moved the affected books to a dry cart, patting their covers with his handkerchief. He placed the bucket on the shelf, and the next drop of water landed inside it with a much more satisfying and contained plop. The problem was managed for now, but his curiosity was piqued. The leak was coming from the attic space above this section, a place he hadn't set foot in for at least a decade. He found the small square door to the attic, hidden behind a tapestry depicting the town's founding. It took some effort to turn the old rusty key in the lock, but the door eventually swung open with a mournful creak, releasing a puff of cool, dusty air. He switched on his flashlight and ascended a narrow, steep set of wooden stairs into the darkness. The attic was a vast, shadowy space directly beneath the copper dome. The rain was much louder up here, a constant drumming roar on the metal above. Wooden beams, thick as a man's waist, crisscrossed the space, and the air was thick with the scent of ancient, dry wood and dust. Ghostly shapes under white dust cloths were scattered about. Old furniture, forgotten displays, and stacks of retired card catalogs. He followed the sound of the rain, his flashlight beam cutting a wobbly circle through the gloom. He found the source of the leak easily enough. A single slate on the small section of roof near the dome had worked its way loose, allowing a tiny, steady trickle of water to seep through. The water was running down a thick wooden beam before dripping through a crack in the floorboards below, which formed the ceiling of the biography section. It was a simple fix, one he could manage himself once the rain stopped. He made a mental note of it. But as he turned to leave, the beam of his flashlight fell upon something else, tucked away beneath the eaves, directly under the path of the dripping beam. It was a large wooden chest bound with iron straps. It was not covered by a dust cloth. It looked as if it had been simply forgotten, left to the dust and the spiders. Intrigued, Arthur made his way over to it, stepping carefully over piles of old newspapers. The chest was not locked. He lifted the heavy lid, which groaned in protest. The beam of his flashlight illuminated the contents, and he drew in a soft breath. The chest was filled to the brim with letters, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, tied in neat bundles with faded silk ribbons. He carefully lifted one of the bundles. The paper was thick and creamy, though yellowed with age. The ink on the top envelope was a faded brown, the handwriting a beautiful lupin cursive. It was addressed to a Miss Eleanor Vance, but it had no stamp. It had never been sent. He untied the fragile ribbon and gently pulled out the letter. He sat down on the dusty floor of the attic, the sound of the rain drumming on the roof above him, and began to read. The letter was from a young man, a soldier in a long-forgotten war, writing to his sweetheart back home. He wrote not of battles, but of the color of the sky, the taste of the water, and his longing for the simple comfort of her presence. It was a letter full of quiet hope and deep affection. Arthur picked up another bundle. These were letters from a woman to her sister who had moved far away. She described the changing of the seasons in the town, the birth of a child, the passing of an old neighbor, the taste of the first strawberries of summer. They were a chronicle of a small, quiet life filled with ordinary joys and sorrows. He spent the rest of the afternoon in that dusty, rain-loud attic. He forgot about his cocoa. He forgot about the time. He moved from bundle to bundle, reading a letter here, a postcard there. He read a letter from a father to his son, full of gentle advice and unspoken pride. He read a note from a schoolteacher, tucked into a book she had meant to return, confessing she had kept it because the story reminded her of her own lost childhood. These were the true whispers of the archive. They were not grand histories or epic poems. They were the small, intimate, heartfelt communications of ordinary people. They were moments of connection, of love, of grief, of hope, that had, for one reason or another, never reached their destination. They had been stored here, in the heart of the library, waiting. The rainy afternoon light began to fade and the attic grew darker, but Arthur barely noticed. He was completely engrossed, transported back in time. He felt a profound connection to these long-gone people, these quiet lives that had been lived within the same streets he walked every day. The leak, the small imperfection in his perfect, quiet library, had led him to this forgotten treasure. It had been a gift. As twilight settled over the town, he finally gathered a few of the bundles in his arms and carefully made his way back down the stairs. He emerged from the attic, blinking in the soft light of the library lamps he had left on. The bucket on the shelf was still collecting the drips with a steady, peaceful rhythm. Plop, plop, plop. He sat down at his desk, the letters piled neatly before him. He did not feel like an intruder reading them. He felt like a keeper, a guardian of these lost whispers. He decided that his new project would be to carefully catalog them, to preserve them, perhaps even to create a special exhibit so that others could feel the same connection he had felt. Outside, the rain finally began to soften, its drumming on the copper dome fading to a gentle patter and then to a near silence. A sliver of moon peeked through a break in the clouds, casting a pale, silvery light through the tall library windows. The air felt washed clean, fresh and new. Arthur sat in the deep, peaceful silence of his library, a single, unsent letter held gently in his hands. He was surrounded by thousands of stories, but tonight he felt as if he had discovered the most important ones of all. The quiet drip from the ceiling had reminded him that even in a place dedicated to stillness and preservation, life, in all its messy, beautiful, and imperfect forms, always finds a way to seep in, bringing with it unexpected gifts and long-forgotten whispers. And so, our 3 tales of the rain come to a gentle close. Silas, the lantern mender, sits in his armchair, the warmth of a purring kitten on his lap, a small beacon of life in his quiet world. Alara, the map weaver, stands before her loom, looking at a tapestry woven from mist and moss, having found color in the gray and inspiration in the stillness. And Arthur, the keeper of whispers, sits in his silent library, holding a letter from the past, his heart full with the discovery of stories he never knew he was protecting. The rain has passed, leaving the world clean and quiet, glistening under the gentle light of the moon. The air is cool and sweet. A deep peace has settled over the cottage by the sea, the cabin in the valley, and the library in the heart of the town. It is the peace that comes after a long, gentle rain, a peace that invites rest and quiet contemplation. This same peace is here for you now. Feel it settling over you like a soft, warm blanket. The stories are over. The day is done. There is nothing left to do but to let go and drift on the gentle tide of your own breath. Allow the quiet and the stillness to carry you down, down, down into a deep and restorative sleep. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. For now, there's only this moment, this peace, this rest. Sleep well, my friend, sleep well. Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is John, and I am an American storyteller. Tonight, I would like to share a story with you, a simple story designed to help you unwind, to let go of the day, and to drift gently into a peaceful and restorative sleep. The story is about a quiet village, a soft evening rainfall, and a small act of kindness that brings unexpected warmth to a solitary heart. It is a story with no sharp edges, no loud noises, and no great hurry. It is meant to be a soft place for your mind to rest. But before we travel to our little village, let's take a few moments to settle in, to become comfortable and still. Find your favorite position for rest, whether you are lying down in bed or resting in a comfortable chair. Allow your body to feel the support of the surface beneath you. Feel the gentle weight of your blankets, the softness of your pillows. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. Nowhere to go. No obligations to fulfill. This time is just for you. Let's begin a gentle journey downward, a slow and easy countdown from 10 to 1. With each number, we will invite a little more peace, a little more stillness into our bodies and our minds. There's no need to force anything. Simply allow it to happen. Let us start with the number 10. Imagine the number 10, soft and glowing, floating gently in your mind's eye. As you see this number, bring your awareness to your breath. Just notice it. Notice the quiet rhythm of your breath as it enters and leaves your body, the cool air as you inhale, and the slightly warmer air as you exhale. You do not need to change it in any way. Just observe this steady, life-affirming rhythm. With each breath, you're letting go of the day that has passed. Every concern, every thought, every task left undone, just let it drift away on the out-breath like a little cloud dissolving into a clear blue sky. 10. Now, let the number 9 appear. As you picture this gentle number, allow your attention to travel to your feet and your legs. Feel them growing heavy, warm, and deeply relaxed. Imagine a soft, warm light beginning at the tips of your toes, a light the color of honey or a warm sunset. Feel this warmth slowly spreading through your feet, soothing every tiny muscle, every joint. It moves up into your ankles, releasing any tension there. It flows into your calves and shins, and then up into your knees and thighs, a wave of gentle, heavy comfort. Your legs feel wonderfully heavy, as if they are sinking softly into the mattress beneath you. 9. And now, the number 8, a number of perfect balance, like two circles resting one upon the other. As you see the number 8, bring that feeling of warm, heavy relaxation up into your hips and your lower back. This is an area where we often hold so much of our daily stress. Just give it permission to let go. Imagine those muscles softening, untying, releasing their grip. Feel your lower back sinking comfortably into the surface you are resting on. There is no need to hold on to anything. You are safe. You are supported. 8. Let the number 7 drift into your awareness. As it does, allow that wave of relaxation to continue its journey upward into your stomach and your chest. Feel your abdomen soften. Let go of any tightness you might be holding there. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest with each steady breath. Feel your heart beating at its own calm, quiet pace, a steady, reassuring rhythm in the center of your being, like a gentle drum beat lulling you toward rest. 7. S. And now, we welcome the number 6. As this number comes to mind, let the warmth and heaviness flow down into your arms. It starts at your shoulders, releasing them, letting them drop away from your ears. The warmth travels down your upper arms, through your elbows, and into your forearms. It pools in your wrists, your hands, and all the way to the tips of your fingers. Your arms feel heavy and limp, completely at rest by your sides. You might even imagine tiny weights, soft as velvet, resting on your palms, grounding you, holding you gently in place. 6. We are halfway there at the number 5, a soft and easy number. As you see the number 5, bring your awareness to your neck and your throat. Allow these muscles to become soft and pliable. Let go of the need to hold your head up. Let your pillow or the surface behind you take its full weight. Imagine the tension melting away from the back of your neck, a place that works so hard all day. Feel a sense of openness and ease in your throat. 5. Now the number 4 floats into view. As it does, let this gentle relaxation travel into your face. Soften your jaw. Let your teeth part slightly. Allow your tongue to rest comfortably in your mouth. Let your cheeks feel soft and slack. Feel the tiny muscles around your eyes release. Let your eyelids be heavy, like soft curtains drawing closed at the end of a long day. Smooth out the space between your eyebrows. Let your entire face be a picture of perfect calm and serenity. 4. And now, the number 3. We are sinking deeper now into a state of profound peace. As you see the number 3, feel this relaxation move to the very top of your head. Imagine your scalp tingling with a gentle, soothing energy. This final wave of physical relaxation washes over you, from the top of your head all the way down to the tips of your toes. Your entire body is now heavy, warm, and wonderfully still. You're completely comfortable, completely at ease. 3. Let the number 2 appear, soft as a whisper. With the number 2, we turn our attention from the body to the mind. Imagine your thoughts are like leaves floating on a slow, moonlit river. You do not need to grab onto them or follow them downstream. Simply watch them as they drift by, one after another, and disappear from view. If your mind wanders, that is perfectly all right. Gently and without judgment, just bring your focus back to the quiet river of your thoughts, watching them float on by. Your mind is becoming as calm and still as a deep, quiet pool of water. 2. And finally, the number 1, the number of unity, of stillness, of peace. As this last number settles in your mind, give yourself permission to let go completely. Let go of the countdown. Let go of my voice. Let go of everything except the gentle feeling of drifting. You are floating in a warm, safe, comfortable space. A space between wakefulness and sleep. A space of perfect tranquility. You are ready for our story. 1. Our story takes place in a village called Oak Haven. It was a place that seemed to have been overlooked by the relentless march of time. Tucked away in a gentle valley, Cradled by rolling hills that were perpetually green, Oak Haven was a tapestry woven from cobblestone, old timber, and blooming window boxes. The River Glen, a ribbon of silver water, ambled lazily along the edge of the village, its banks thick with willows that dipped their long, slender fingers into the current. The heart of Oak Haven was its village square. It was not a grand or imposing square, but a cozy, intimate space, paved with stones that had been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, cartwheels, and the patter of rain. In the center of the square stood an old stone fountain, a moss-covered basin from which a gentle stream of water trickled with a soothing, constant murmur. It was the village's quiet heartbeat. Surrounding the square were buildings that leaned companionably against one another, their timber-framed walls painted in soft, muted colors, creamy yellow, dusty rose, and a pale, misty blue. There was the baker's shop, from which the scent of warm bread seemed to permanently emanate, a comforting ghost that haunted the cobblestones. There was the post office, with its cheerful red door and brass letterbox polished to a gleam. And there was the Green Dragon Inn, its windows always aglow with a warm, inviting light, like the eyes of a friendly giant. On the western side of the square, nestled between the apothecary and a shop that sold handmade woolens, stood the Oak Haven Village Library. It was a handsome building, made of the same dark timber and pale plaster as its neighbors, but it held a certain quiet dignity. Its windows were leaded glass, creating diamond-shaped panes that distorted the view of the world outside, making it seem even more like a place of fantasy and escape. Above the sturdy oak door, a sign swung gently in the breeze, bearing the simple, elegant words, "The Library." The keeper of this quiet sanctuary was a man named Arthur Pumble. Arthur was a man who fit his surroundings as perfectly as a key fits its lock. He was neither old nor young, but somewhere in that comfortable, settled middle place. He had kind eyes the color of faded denim, and a gentle smile that appeared more often in his eyes than on his lips. His hair, the color of autumn leaves, was a little unruly, as if he often ran his hands through it while lost in thought, which he frequently was. Arthur loved the library with a deep and abiding affection. It was more than just a building full of books to him. It was a repository of stories, of dreams, of countless lives lived between paper and ink. He knew the location of every volume, not by some catalog system, but by feel, by memory, by the book's very personality. He could tell you that the collection of sea shanties was on the third shelf from the bottom, just to the left of the dusty tome on local folklore, the one with the slightly torn cover that smelled faintly of vanilla. His days were measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the quiet rituals of his work. The gentle thud of the return stamp, the soft rustle of turning pages, the low murmur of a patron asking for a recommendation. He cherished the peaceful quiet of the afternoons, when the only sounds were the motes of dust dancing and the shafts of sunlight slanting through the tall windows, and the sleepy creak of the old wooden floorboards. On this particular evening, as autumn was beginning to sigh its first cool breath into the valley, Arthur was preparing to close the library. The sun had already dipped below the western hills, painting the sky in strokes of soft lavender and pale gold. The gas lamps in the village square had just been lit by the lamplighter, their flames flickering to life one by one. casting long, dancing shadows on the wet cobblestones, for it had begun to rain. It had not started with a sudden downpour, but with a gentle, hesitant patter, as if the sky were testing the ground. Now it had settled into a steady, soft rhythm, a peaceful drumming on the library's slate roof. The sound was a familiar comfort to Arthur, a kind of music that made the warmth and light of the library feel even more precious, more sheltering. He walked through the hushed aisles, his soft-soled shoes making almost no sound on the floor. He ran his hand along the spines of the books, a familiar, affectionate gesture, like patting the heads of old friends. He checked the windows, ensuring each latch was securely fastened against the cool, damp air. The rain traced silvery rivulets down the diamond-shaped panes, blurring the warm lights of the village square into soft, glowing orbs. His final task was to bank the fire in the large stone fireplace that dominated the reading room. The flames had burned down to a cozy bed of embers, glowing with a deep, pulsing orange like a sleeping dragon's heart. He carefully placed the heavy brass screen in front of the hearth, its mesh casting a delicate, web-like shadow on the rug. The warmth from the embers pushed back against the evening's chill, filling the room with the gentle scent of wood smoke and old paper. With a final, lingering look around the quiet, sleeping library, Arthur took his coat from the hook behind his desk. It was a sturdy tweed coat, a little worn at the elbows but comfortable and warm. He wrapped a dark green woolen scarf around his neck, a gift from Mrs. Gable, who ran the woolen shop next door. Then he picked up his old leather satchel, switched off the main reading lamp, and plunged the room into a soft, fire-lit gloom. He locked the heavy oak door behind him. The click of the lock sounded unusually loud in the quiet evening. He turned the large, ornate brass key, a motion he had performed thousands of times, and slipped it into his pocket. For a moment, he stood under the small awning of the library, listening to the rain. It was a sound that seemed to wash the world clean, hushing the day's lingering noises and leaving only its own gentle, rhythmic whisper. The air smelled of wet stone, damp earth, and the sweet, decaying scent of autumn leaves. The gas lamps cast a golden, shimmering light upon the puddles that had formed between the cobblestones, turning them into miniature, wavering mirrors that reflected the darkened sky. The village square was deserted. Everyone, it seemed, had been sensible enough to retreat into the warmth and comfort of their own homes. The windows of the surrounding houses and shops glowed with a welcoming light, each one a small beacon of coziness in the rainy twilight. Arthur pulled his collar up and began his walk home. His cottage was not far, just a short stroll across the square and down a narrow, winding lane called Willow Creek Path. His footsteps made a soft, splashing sound on the wet stones, a rhythm that accompanied the steady drumming of the rain on his hat and shoulders. He enjoyed these solitary walks, especially in the rain. It felt as if the village were his alone for a few precious moments, wrapped in a blanket of soft, gray quiet. He passed the bakery, its windows dark now, but a faint, lingering scent of cinnamon and yeast still clung to the air. He nodded toward the Green Dragon Inn, where the muffled sounds of laughter and the clinking of glasses could be heard, a warm pocket of cheerfulness in the damp evening. The rain was not cold or harsh. It was a gentle, persistent shower that felt more cleansing than inconvenient. As he reached the center of the square, near the old stone fountain, he paused. The water from the fountain mingled with the rain, its soft trickle almost indistinguishable from the patter on the stones around it. He was about to continue on his way when he heard it. A sound so small, so faint, that it was nearly lost beneath the music of the rain. It was a tiny, high-pitched cry, a sound of distress. Arthur stopped, standing perfectly still, and tilted his head to listen more closely. He held his breath. The sound came again, a little stronger this time, a thin, wavering mewl that seemed to come from the direction of the covered market stalls on the far side of the square. The stalls were closed for the night, their wooden shutters bolted, creating dark, shadowy alcoves beneath their canvas awnings. Curiosity and a gentle tug of concern pulled him from his path. He walked slowly toward the market stalls, his eyes scanning the deep shadows. The rain dripped steadily from the edge of the awnings, creating a curtain of water that he had to pass through. The mewling sound grew more distinct now, a definite plea for help. He peered into the darkness beneath a stall that had, earlier in the day, been laden with bright red apples and golden pears. And there, huddled in the farthest, driest corner, was a tiny, trembling ball of black fur. It was a kitten, a very small, very wet, and very frightened kitten. Its fur was slicked down with rain, making it look even smaller than it was. Two enormous green eyes, luminous in the gloom, stared up at him, wide with a mixture of fear and hope. It let out another pitiful cry, a sound that went straight to Arthur's quiet heart. "Oh, you poor little thing," he whispered, his voice soft so as not to startle it further. He crouched down slowly, the wet cobblestones cold against his knees. He held out his hand, palm up, moving with a deliberate, gentle slowness. The kitten flinched back at first, pressing itself against the rough wooden wall of the stall. It was shivering, either from cold or from fear, or likely both. "It's all right," Arthur murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "I'm not going to hurt you." He stayed there for a long moment, his hand outstretched, letting the tiny creature get used to his presence. He didn't try to move closer. He simply waited, a patient statue in the rain-swept square. The kitten watched him, its wide green eyes unblinking. It mewed again, but this time the sound was less a cry of panic and more a question. Slowly, tentatively, the kitten took a tiny step forward, then another. It sniffed at the air, its little pink nose twitching. It crept closer to Arthur's hand, stretched out its neck, and gave his fingers a cautious, exploratory sniff. Its whiskers, beaded with tiny drops of rain, tickled his skin. Apparently satisfied that he posed no threat, the kitten took another step and rubbed its small, wet head against his fingertips. The gesture was so full of trust, so unexpected, that it made Arthur's chest feel taut with a sudden, warm emotion. He could feel the frantic, rapid beating of its tiny heart through its damp fur. "There now," he said softly. "You're all alone out here, aren't you?" He gently stroked the kitten's back with one finger. It arched into his touch, and, to his astonishment, a faint, rumbling purr started up, a sound like a tiny, distant motor. It was a brave sound in the face of its predicament. Arthur knew he couldn't leave it here. The night was growing colder, and the rain showed no sign of stopping. The kitten was too small to survive on its own. With great care, he unwound the woolen scarf from his neck. It was warm and dry on the inside. He gently scooped the little creature into his hands. It was startlingly light, weighing almost nothing at all. It trembled but didn't struggle. It seemed to understand that it was being rescued. He carefully wrapped the kitten in the soft, dry folds of his scarf, leaving only its small head peeking out. It immediately snuggled in, burrowing into the warmth. Arthur tucked the small woolen bundle inside his tweed coat, holding it securely against his chest. He could feel the warmth of its small body and the vibration of its purr against his ribs. He stood up, his knees creaking slightly, and looked around the empty square one last time. There was no sign of a mother cat, no one calling for a lost pet. There was only the sound of the rain and the soft, rhythmic purring coming from inside his coat. "Well, little one," he said quietly to the bundle, "it looks like you're coming home with me for the night." He turned and continued his journey, his steps now having a renewed sense of purpose. The short walk to Willow Creek Path felt different now. He was no longer just a solitary man walking home in the rain. He was a protector, a guardian of the tiny, warm life he held against his heart. The weight was insignificant, but the responsibility felt profound and surprisingly pleasant. He walked more carefully now, avoiding the deeper puddles, his hand held protectively over the opening of his coat to shield the kitten's head from the rain. The world seemed to have softened, the golden light from the lamps more gentle, the sound of the rain more like a lullaby. The small, purring presence against his chest changed everything. Willow Creek Path was a narrow lane that branched off from the main square, following the gentle curve of the river. It was lined with small, charming cottages, each with its own little garden in the front, now glistening and dark with rain. Arthur's cottage was the last one on the lane, set slightly back from the path, with a large oak tree standing sentinel beside it. His cottage was called the Nook, a name that suited it perfectly. It was small and cozy, with a steeply pitched roof made of dark gray slate and a chimney that puffed smoke like an old man clearing his throat. A climbing rose bush, now bare of flowers, clung to the front wall, its thorny branches making intricate patterns against the whitewashed plaster. A warm, yellow light shone from the small window next to the front door, a light he had left on for himself that morning, never imagining he would be returning with a guest. He navigated the flagstone path that led to his bright blue front door. He fumbled for his house key, a task made more difficult by his desire not to jostle the precious cargo inside his coat. The kitten had gone quiet, and he hoped it had fallen asleep, lulled by the warmth and the rhythmic motion of his walking. The key finally found the lock, and the door swung inward with a familiar, friendly creak. He stepped inside, out of the rain and into the immediate embrace of his home. The air inside was warm and smelled of beeswax, old books, and the faint, pleasant aroma of the pipe tobacco he occasionally smoked in the evenings. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the sound of the rain and the cool, damp night. The silence of the cottage settled around him, a comfortable, familiar blanket. He slipped off his wet hat and coat, being exquisitely careful as he did so. He laid the coat on the back of his armchair and then gently unwrapped the scarf. The kitten was indeed asleep. It was curled into a tight little ball, its tiny black ears twitching slightly in its dreams. Its fur was already beginning to dry and fluff up in the warmth of the scarf. It looked impossibly small and vulnerable. Arthur felt a surge of tenderness so powerful it almost took him by surprise. He carried the sleeping bundle over to the fireplace. He had laid the fire that morning, ready to be lit. He struck a match and held it to the kindling. The small flame caught, licked at the dry twigs, and then grew, casting a dancing, cheerful light around the room. The logs began to crackle and pop, a sound that was the very definition of comfort. As the warmth from the fire began to fill the room, Arthur knew he needed to properly dry his little guest. He went to the linen closet and found his softest, oldest hand towel, one that had been washed so many times it felt like velvet. He returned to the hearth and gently lifted the kitten from the scarf. It stirred at the movement, its green eyes blinking open sleepily. It looked up at Arthur, and this time there was no fear in its gaze, only a drowsy curiosity. He began to rub the kitten with the soft towel, using slow, gentle strokes. The kitten stretched, enjoying the sensation, and its purr started up again, louder this time, a contented rumble that filled the quiet space between them. He dried its tiny paws, its slender tail, and the soft fur behind its ears. As its coat dried, it transformed from a slick, bedraggled creature into a fluffy, impossibly soft ball of black soot. It was all fur and eyes, with a tiny pink nose that looked like a button. Once it was dry, the kitten seemed to be fully awake, and it appeared suddenly ravenous. It began to weave around Arthur's ankles, rubbing against his legs and looking up at him with an expression of hopeful expectation. Its mew now a tiny, insistent question. All right, I'm getting the message," Arthur chuckled. "You must be hungry." He wasn't sure what to feed such a tiny creature. He went to his small kitchen, a cozy space with blue and white tiled counters and copper pots hanging from a rack. He opened his pantry. He had cheese, bread, some cold chicken from the previous night's dinner, and a bottle of milk from the morning delivery. Milk seemed the most likely choice. He poured a small amount of milk into a saucepan and warmed it gently on the stove, testing it with his finger until it was just lukewarm. He didn't have a proper bowl for a kitten, so he used one of his own saucers, a delicate piece of china with a pattern of blue willows around the edge. He poured the warm milk into the saucer and placed it on the floor by the hearth. The kitten needed no encouragement. It trotted over to the saucer immediately, lowered its head, and began to lap at the milk with surprising gusto. Its tiny pink tongue worked quickly, making a soft, lapping sound that Arthur found utterly charming. It was so absorbed in its meal that its whole body wiggled with concentration. In a minute, the saucer was licked clean. The kitten looked up at him, a tiny drop of milk clinging to its whiskers, and blinked slowly, a clear sign of feline contentment. It then proceeded to give itself a thorough wash, its small body contorting into the comical positions that only cats can manage. It was clearly feeling much better. Now that the immediate needs of food and warmth had been met, Arthur needed to fashion a bed for his guest. He found a small, sturdy cardboard box that had once held a delivery of books, It seemed the perfect size. He took it back to the living room and placed it on the hearth rug, not too close to the fire, but near enough to feel its warmth. From his airing cupboard, he retrieved an old, soft woolen blanket. It was a faded tartan pattern of green and blue, and it smelled faintly of lavender. He folded it carefully and placed it inside the box, creating a thick, soft cushion. He had made a little nest in a safe and cozy den. He gently picked up the kitten. It was sleepy now, its belly full of warm milk. It curled up in his hands, purring contentedly. He lowered it into the box, onto the soft blanket. The kitten kneaded the blanket with its tiny paws for a moment, a rhythmic, instinctive gesture of comfort. Then it circled 3 times, tucked its nose under its tail, and with a soft sigh, fell fast asleep. Arthur stood there for a long time, just watching the tiny creature sleep. He watched the gentle rise and fall of its fluffy black side, listened to the almost inaudible sound of its soft breathing. The firelight flickered over its sleeping form, making its fur glow with hints of auburn. The little cottage, which had always felt cozy and sufficient for one, now felt different. It felt fuller, warmer. The silence was no longer just an absence of noise. It was a shared, peaceful quiet. He realized he was still in his damp socks and had not yet had his own dinner. He moved quietly, so as not to disturb the sleeping kitten, and went about his evening routine. He changed into dry, comfortable clothes and made himself a simple supper of cheese, bread, and a crisp apple. He brewed a pot of his favorite chamomile tea, its fragrant steam filling the small kitchen. He brought his meal and his tea into the living room and settled into his favorite armchair, a large, comfortable wing-back chair upholstered in worn green leather. From this vantage point, he could see both the crackling fire and the small cardboard box where his unexpected guest was sleeping. He ate his simple meal slowly, savoring the quiet contentment of the moment. The rain continued to fall outside, a gentle, steady drumming on the roof and a soft hissing against the window panes. The wind sighed in the chimney, a low, mournful sound that only made the warmth of the cottage feel more secure, more precious. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked its steady, reassuring rhythm, marking the slow, peaceful passage of time. And now, there was a new sound in the symphony of the cottage. Beneath the crackle of the fire, the drumming of the rain, and the ticking of the clock, there was the faint, intermittent purr of a sleeping kitten. It was a small sound, but it seemed to fill the room with a profound sense of peace. Arthur picked up the book he had been reading, a volume of poetry by a long-forgotten poet. He opened it to his bookmarked page, but he didn't read. Instead, he found himself simply looking into the fire, his thoughts drifting like the smoke up the chimney. He thought about his quiet, orderly life. He had always found contentment in solitude, in the company of his books and his own thoughts. His days were predictable, his routines comforting in their familiarity. He had never felt that anything was missing. And yet, the presence of this tiny, living creature in his home had opened up a small door in his heart that he hadn't even known was closed. He looked over at the sleeping kitten, a small, dark shape in its cozy box. It was a creature of pure innocence, utterly dependent on his kindness. The act of rescuing it, of bringing it into his warm, safe home, had filled him with a quiet joy, a sense of purpose that went beyond the shelving of books and the stamping of due dates. He wondered where it had come from. Had it wandered away from its mother? Had it been born astray in some corner of the village? Or had it been abandoned? The thought sent a small pang of sadness through him. He decided that in the morning he would make some inquiries. He would put a notice up in the post office and ask around the village. It was the right thing to do. Someone might be missing their pet. But as he thought this, a part of him, a quiet, selfish part, hoped that no one would claim the little creature. He found himself already thinking of names. Pip, perhaps, or Soot, something small and simple. He smiled to himself in the firelight. He, Arthur Pumble, a man of quiet habits and solitary disposition, was contemplating names for a cat. The tea in his cup had grown cool. He set it aside and leaned his head back against the soft leather of the armchair. His eyelids felt heavy. The warmth of the fire, the gentle sounds of the rainy night, and the deep sense of peace that had settled over him were a powerful soporific. The fire burned lower, the crackling logs settling into a bed of glowing, radiant embers. The light in the room softened, the shadows growing longer and deeper. The grandfather clock struck 9, its chimes soft and resonant, echoing through the quiet cottage. Arthur's gaze drifted back to the cardboard box. The kitten stirred in its sleep, stretched out one tiny paw, and then settled back into a deep, untroubled slumber. A small, contented sigh escaped its lips. Arthur's own breathing began to slow, to deepen, matching the peaceful rhythm of the sleeping animal. He thought of the library, now dark and silent, its thousands of stories waiting patiently on their shelves. He thought of the village square, washed clean by the rain, the gas lamps casting a lonely, golden glow on the empty cobblestones. He thought of his own small, warm cottage, a tiny island of light and comfort in the vast, dark night. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the simple things, a warm fire, a roof over his head, a good book, a hot cup of tea. And now, for this unexpected, tiny companion, whose sudden appearance had turned an ordinary rainy evening into something memorable, something special. The world outside could rage with storms, but in here, in this small, quiet room, there was only peace. There was the steady, gentle breathing of a man and a kitten, the soft glow of the embers and the lulling, ceaseless music of the rain. Whatever had been, had been. Whatever will be, will be. But for now, there was only this moment of perfect, quiet contentment. A man, a kitten, and a soft rainfall in the village square. Arthur closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his face. He was no longer just the keeper of the library. He was the keeper of a tiny, purring secret. And as the rain whispered its lullaby against the glass, he let himself drift gently and peacefully into a deep and dreamless sleep. The night deepened around the small cottage on Willow Creek Path. The rain, having washed the world clean, softened to a fine, misty drizzle that clung to the window panes like a veil of tiny diamonds. The wind died down, and a profound stillness settled over Oak Haven. The last light in the Green Dragon Inn was extinguished, and the village was given over to darkness and slumber, save for the faithful gas lamps that kept their lonely vigil in the square. Inside the nook, the fire in the hearth had burned down to a gentle, pulsing heart of crimson and orange embers, casting a soft, warm glow that barely reached the corners of the room. The shadows were deep and comforting, like soft blankets. The grandfather clock continued its steady, patient ticking, a sound so familiar to Arthur that he would have noticed its absence more than its presence. It was the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of his home. In his large leather armchair, Arthur slept soundly. His head was tilted slightly to one side, his breathing slow and even. The book of poetry lay open on his lap, its pages illuminated by the faint firelight. The look of gentle contentment had not left his face even in sleep. He was dreaming, not of grand adventures or far-off lands, but of simple, peaceful things. The smell of old books, the warmth of the sun on his face, and the soft rumbling purr of a very small cat. And in the cardboard box on the hearth rug, the kitten slept on, curled in a perfect circle of black fluff. Its tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. Occasionally, its whiskers would twitch, or its paws would make a soft running motion as it chased dream mice through fields of soft wool and warm milk. It was safe. It was warm. It was home, at least for tonight. The hours of the night passed slowly, peacefully. The moon, a pale sliver of silver, broke through the clouds for a moment, casting a cool, ethereal light through the cottage window. It traced a path across the wooden floor, touched the edge of the armchair, and illuminated the sleeping form of the kitten, making its dark fur shine as if spun from moonlight itself. Then the clouds drifted back, and the soft, gentle darkness returned. There was a sense of perfect harmony in the small room. The sleeping man, the sleeping animal, the dying fire, the ticking clock, the silent, waiting books on the shelves, all were part of a single, peaceful tableau. It was a scene of quiet refuge, a sanctuary from the complexities and noises of the wider world. It was a testament to the simple, profound comfort that can be found in a small act of kindness, in the sharing of warmth on a cold, rainy night. The night was a long, unbroken expanse of peace. There were no disturbances, no jarring sounds, only the gentle symphony of the quiet cottage. The rain had stopped completely now, and the silence outside was deep and absolute. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the dawn. And as the first faint hint of gray began to lighten the eastern sky, a new day was stirring, a day that would be different for Arthur Pumble. His quiet, orderly life had been gently, unexpectedly, and wonderfully interrupted. The solitude of his cottage was no longer absolute. A tiny, purring heartbeat had joined the steady ticking of his clock. But, for now, there was only sleep. Deep, restorative, and peaceful sleep. The kind of sleep that mends the body and soothes the soul. And so we leave them there, the librarian and the kitten, safe and warm in their cozy nook, while the last of the night shadows dissolve, and the world prepares to wake. Rest now. Sleep now. All is well. Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is John, and I'm an American storyteller. I'm so glad you're here tonight, ready to let go of the day and drift into a peaceful, restorative sleep. Tonight's story is a simple one. It is a story about a quiet walk home through a town bathed in the gentle, golden light of old-fashioned lanterns. It is about the simple beauty found in stillness, in the soft sounds of a sleeping town, and in the feeling of warmth and safety waiting for you at the end of your journey. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. There is nothing else you need to do. All that is required of you is to rest, to breathe, and allow the story to unfold around you, like a soft, warm blanket. So let us begin by finding that place of perfect comfort. Settle into your bed and let your body grow heavy. Feel the gentle support of the mattress beneath you, holding you completely. Allow your arms and legs to find their own comfortable positions. Let your shoulders relax, releasing any tension they might be holding. Take a slow, deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs, cool and clean. And as you breathe out, release the day. Let go of all the thoughts, all the worries, all the lists of things to do. They can wait for another time. They have no place here in this quiet sanctuary you have created for yourself. This time is for you. This time is for rest. We're going to begin our journey into deep relaxation with a gentle countdown from 10 to 1. With each number, we will invite a deeper sense of peace and stillness into our bodies and minds. There is no effort required. Simply listen to the sound of my voice and allow yourself to follow along into a state of profound calm. 10. Let us begin with your attention. All day long, your mind has been busy, darting from one thought to another, like a bee in a field of flowers. Now, it is time for it to come to rest. Imagine your thoughts are like clouds drifting across a vast, star-lit sky. You do not need to hold on to them or push them away. Simply observe them as they pass, growing fainter and more distant with each moment. Give your mind permission to be quiet. Give it permission to be still. With your next gentle exhale, feel a wave of calm washing over your mind, soothing it, quieting it, preparing it for a night of deep and peaceful dreams. 9. Bring your awareness now to your head and face. Feel the weight of your head resting completely on your pillow. Release any tension you might be holding in your scalp. Let your forehead become smooth and untroubled. Allow the tiny muscles around your eyes to soften, letting go of the need to see or focus. Let your eyelids rest gently, like soft curtains drawing closed at the end of the day. Relax your cheeks, your jaw, letting your teeth part ever so slightly. A feeling of gentle warmth spreads across your entire face, a warmth that speaks of safety and release. 8. Let this wave of relaxation flow downwards into your neck and shoulders. This is where we so often carry the burdens of the day, like a heavy coat we have forgotten to take off. Now's the time to let that coat slide from your shoulders. Feel the muscles in your neck lengthen and soften. Feel your shoulders drop away from your ears, releasing their grip. Imagine all the tension, all the stress simply melting away, like snow in the warm spring sun. A deep sense of relief settles in your shoulders, and you feel lighter, freer. 7. The feeling of peacefulness continues to travel down through your arms, all the way to your fingertips. Feel your upper arms grow heavy and relaxed. Let your elbows be soft. Feel the relaxation move through your forearms, into your wrists, and into your hands. Your hands have done so much today. Now they can rest. Let your fingers curl gently, releasing any need to hold or to grasp. A gentle, tingling warmth might begin to pool in the palms of your hands, a sign of your body letting go completely. Your arms feel wonderfully heavy, wonderfully still. 6. Now, bring your focus to your chest and your upper back. This is the home of your heart and your lungs, which work so steadily for you day and night. Become aware of the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest with each breath. It is a slow, steady, and reassuring rhythm, like the quiet tide on a calm sea. There is no need to change it or control it. Simply notice it. With each exhale, feel your chest and back sinking a little deeper into the mattress, releasing and letting go. A feeling of open, spacious calm fills your entire torso. 5. The warmth of relaxation now flows down into your stomach and your lower back. Let go of any tightness you might be holding in your abdomen. Allow your stomach to be soft and at ease. Feel the muscles of your lower back release their hold, spreading out and resting completely against the surface beneath you. The gentle rhythm of your breathing can be felt here too, a soft rise and fall that massages you from the inside out, bringing a sense of deep internal peace. You are safe. You are supported. 4. This wonderful, heavy feeling of relaxation continues its journey downwards, into your hips and down through your legs. Feel your legs grow heavy, as if they are anchored gently to the bed. Let go of the strength in your thighs. Allow your knees to be soft and loose. The feeling of release flows down through your calves and your shins, soothing all the muscles that carried you through your day. Your legs have nowhere to go now, nothing to do but rest completely. 3. Bring your awareness all the way down to your feet and ankles. Your feet carry you through the world, and they deserve this moment of perfect rest. Feel your ankles relax. Let your feet fall naturally to the sides, releasing any remaining tension. Imagine a gentle, soothing warmth enveloping your feet, from your heels to the very tips of your toes. It is a feeling of being grounded, of being completely at ease. Your entire body, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, is now in a state of deep and profound relaxation. 2. As your body rests, your mind continues to quiet. The world outside this room begins to fade away. The sounds of the evening become distant and muffled, part of a gentle backdrop to your journey into sleep. The space you're in feels safe and secure, a cozy haven just for you. Your breath is your anchor, a slow, steady rhythm in the quiet, in and out, a gentle tide of peace. You are drifting now, floating in a calm, dark, and comfortable space between wakefulness and sleep. 1. You are here, in a place of perfect stillness and peace. You are ready for sleep, ready to let go completely and allow the story to carry you away. There's nothing left to do. Simply rest. Simply be, and let the quiet walk home begin. The story began, as many often did, at the end of something else. For Arthur, it was the end of a long and quiet day spent among the hushed reverence of books. He was the town librarian, a keeper of stories and silence, and his days were measured in the soft rustle of turning pages and the gentle thump of a book being stamped. The library was an old building made of dark stone and even darker wood, and it smelled perpetually of aged paper, leather, and the faint sweet scent of beeswax polish. It was a smell Arthur had come to associate with peace. As the last rays of the autumn sun bled from the sky, painting the high arched windows in shades of bruised purple and soft orange, Arthur performed his closing rituals. He walked through the aisles, his soft-soled shoes making almost no sound on the worn wooden floors. He straightened a book here, pushed in a chair there. His movements were slow and deliberate, born of years of repetition. He was a man who found comfort in routine, in the predictable and steady rhythm of his life. The large grandfather clock in the main hall, a magnificent creature of polished mahogany with a face like a pale moon, began to chime the hour of 6. Its chimes were deep and resonant, each one seeming to hang in the dusty air for a moment before fading. Arthur paused, as he always did, to listen to all 6 chimes. It was the library's gentle way of saying that the day was done. The sound was a familiar friend, a deep, reassuring voice in the profound quiet. He checked the windows, ensuring each latch was securely fastened against the cool night air that was beginning to seep into the town. From the tall window in the history section, he could see the lamplighter beginning his work on the far side of the town square. One by one, the gas-style lanterns flickered to life, their flames small and hesitant at first, then growing into steady golden orbs of light. They did not banish the darkness, but rather made friends with it, creating deep, soft shadows and pools of warm, inviting light. Arthur felt a familiar weight settle upon his shoulders. It was not a heavy or unpleasant weight, but simply the accumulation of the day's quiet focus. It was the feeling of a task completed, a responsibility fulfilled. He gathered his coat, a thick, dark wool that had served him well for many years, and a soft, gray scarf that had been a gift. He wrapped the scarf around his neck, the wool warm and slightly scratchy against his skin. Finally, he stood before the great oak doors of the library. He pulled the heavy iron key from his pocket. It was a large, ornate thing, and it felt cool and substantial in his hand. He inserted it into the lock, and the sound of the tumblers turning was loud in the silence. A solid, satisfying clunk echoed through the empty hall as the bolt slid home. He pulled the door, testing it to make sure it was secure. It was. The library was now asleep for the night, dreaming its quiet dreams of words and paper. Arthur turned and faced the evening. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant, comforting smell of wood smoke from a chimney somewhere nearby. The sky above was a deep, velvety indigo, and the first few stars were beginning to prick through the darkness like tiny pinholes in a vast blanket. He stood for a moment on the top step, simply breathing in the night. He could have taken the direct route home, a short walk of only a few blocks down the main street. But tonight, he felt a pull towards the older, quieter part of town. He decided to take the long way home, a meandering path through the narrow, cobbled streets that wound their way along the little river. It was a walk he saved for evenings like this, when the air was still and the world seemed to be holding its breath. He pulled his coat a little tighter around himself and set off, his footsteps the only sound in the immediate quiet. The stone steps of the library were worn smooth in the middle from generations of patrons, and he descended them carefully. At the bottom, his feet met the uneven surface of the cobblestones. The sound of his leather-soled shoes on the stones was a gentle, rhythmic tap, tap, tapping, a soft percussion accompanying his solitary journey. The lantern just outside the library cast a perfect circle of honey-colored light on the ground. As he walked out of its glow, he was momentarily enveloped in a soft shadow before entering the pool of light from the next lantern down the street. His walk would be a journey through these alternating islands of light and darkness, a gentle rhythm of bright and dim. He walked past the town hall, a proud stone building with a clock tower that answered the library's grandfather clock on the quarter hour. Tonight, its face was illuminated, a gigantic golden coin hanging in the darkness. Arthur glanced up at it, a familiar and reassuring landmark. The hands pointed to a few minutes past 6. There was no hurry, nowhere to be now, nowhere to go, no obligations. There was only the walk. The street he was on was lined with small shops all closed for the night. Their windows were dark, but the lantern light caught on the glass, creating soft, distorted reflections of the street and of his own passing figure. He saw himself as a silhouette, a quiet man in a dark coat, moving through a quiet town. The sight was not lonely, but peaceful. He felt a sense of belonging, of being a small, integral part of this sleeping world. He passed the bakery first, even though Mrs. Gable had closed hours ago. A faint, delicious warmth still seemed to radiate from the building. If he stood close to the door, he could smell the lingering ghost of the day's baking. It was a scent of yeast and sugar and cinnamon, a smell that spoke of simple comforts and daily bread. The windows were dark, but in his mind he could see the racks of cooling loaves, the trays of cookies and pastries, all waiting for the morning. A small, hand-painted sign still hung in the window. Apple cider donuts. Arthur smiled to himself. Mrs. Gable's donuts were a local legend, especially in the autumn. He made a mental note to stop by in the morning on his way to work. The thought of the warm, sugary treat was a pleasant one. A small, bright promise for the coming day. He continued on, the sound of his footsteps a steady companion. The cobblestones beneath his feet were not uniform. Some were smooth and rounded, others were more angular, and he had learned their texture over the years, his feet navigating them with an easy familiarity. In some places, moss grew in the cracks between the stones, a vibrant, soft green even in the dim light. The dampness in the air made the stones slick and shiny, and they reflected the lantern light like 1,000 dark, sleepy eyes. The next shop was the little toy store, run by old Mr. Alistair. Its bay window was filled with a charming clutter of handmade wooden toys. There were spinning tops painted in bright, cheerful colors, a row of smiling wooden soldiers, and a beautiful rocking horse with a yarn mane. Arthur always paused here. The lantern light gave the toys a magical quality, as if they might come to life the moment he turned his back. He looked at the rocking horse. Its painted eyes seemed to hold a gentle wisdom. He imagined the sound of a child's laughter, the gentle creak of the wooden rockers on a floorboard. The thought brought a soft, wistful feeling to his heart. He had no children of his own, but he loved seeing the town's children come into the library, their eyes wide with wonder as they chose their books. He felt he was a guardian of their imaginations, just as Mr. Alistair was a guardian of their play. In the corner of the window, there was a small, intricately carved music box. It was open, and a tiny ballerina stood poised on its surface. Arthur wished for a moment that he could hear its tune, a faint, tinkling melody in the vast silence of the street. But its silence was a kind of music too, a quiet promise of a song waiting to be played. He moved on from the toy shop, carrying the image of the little ballerina with him. The street began to narrow. and the buildings leaned in a little closer, as if sharing secrets in the night. The architecture here was older, a charming jumble of timber-framed houses and stone storefronts. Chimneys puffed out gentle streams of white smoke that rose straight up into the still air before dissipating into the darkness. They looked like old men clearing their throats, a soft, domestic sound made visible. A cat, a sleek black shadow with eyes like polished jade, sat perfectly still on a windowsill, watching him pass. It did not move, did not blink. It was a small, living statue, a silent observer of the night. Arthur gave a slow, respectful nod to the cat. The cat, in return, offered a slow, deliberate blink, a sign of trust and acceptance in its own silent language. For a brief moment, there were two solitary beings sharing the quiet of the evening. The air grew colder as he neared the town square. This was the heart of the town, a wide, open space with a stone fountain at its center. In the summer, the square was filled with the sound of children's laughter and the splash of water. On market days, it was a bustling hub of activity filled with vendors and shoppers. But now, it was vast and empty. The fountain was silent, drained for the winter, its stone basin filled with a collection of dry, brown leaves that rustled when the breeze whispered through them. The lanterns surrounding the square cast long, dancing shadows that stretched across the open space. His own shadow grew long and thin, walking ahead of him like a silent guide. He crossed the square, his footsteps echoing more loudly here, the sound seeming to magnify in the emptiness. He felt very small under the vast, starry sky, but it was a comfortable smallness. It was the feeling of being part of something immense and beautiful. He thought of all the history these stones had seen, the festivals, the speeches, the quiet meetings of friends, the solitary walks of countless others just like him, through countless other nights. The square held these memories in its stones, in the worn benches that circled the fountain, in the very air itself. To walk here was to walk through time, to feel the faint, ghostly echo of all the lives that had touched this place. On the far side of the square, a narrow lane led down towards the river. This was Arthur's favorite part of the walk. The lane was called Water Street, and it was flanked by the high stone walls of old warehouses that had long since been converted into quiet homes. The air here was always a little damper, a little cooler, and it carried the fresh, clean scent of moving water. As he turned onto the lane, the sound of the river reached him. It was not a loud sound, but a soft, constant shushing, a gentle murmur that was deeply soothing. It was the sound of something steady and eternal, a current that had flowed through this town long before any of the houses were built and would continue to flow long after they were gone. The lanterns on this lane were older, their glass panes wavy and imperfect, which made the light they cast seem to tremble and shimmer. The light fell upon the stone walls, highlighting the texture of the rock and the dark green ivy that clung to it. It was like walking through a painting, a world rendered in soft golds, deep greens, and velvety blacks. He reached the small, arched stone bridge that crossed the river. He stopped in the middle of it, resting his hands on the cold, smooth stone of the parapet. He leaned over and looked down at the water. The river was dark, like polished ink, but its surface was alive with the reflected lights of the lanterns. Each light was a streak of shimmering gold, quivering on the gentle current, like leaves on a moonlit river. He watched the reflections for a long time, mesmerized by their gentle, constant motion. The water flowed silently beneath the bridge, carrying the lights with it for a short distance before they disappeared into the darkness downstream. It was a quiet, beautiful spectacle, a private light show just for him. He felt the tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying in his neck and back begin to dissolve, as if the river were carrying it away along with the shimmering lights. A single, pale leaf drifted by on the current, spinning slowly in a small eddy near the bank. It was a perfect, tiny boat on a vast, dark sea. He watched it until it too was swallowed by the shadows. The smallness of the leaf, the vastness of the river, the quiet of the night, it all combined to create a feeling of profound and simple peace within him. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. For now, there was only this moment on the bridge. He straightened up, his hands cold from the stone. He tucked them into the warm pockets of his coat and continued his walk. The bridge led to the residential part of town, where the streets were lined with modest, well-kept houses. Here, the atmosphere changed subtly. The silence was more domestic. Behind the dark windows and drawn curtains were sleeping families, warm beds, and quiet dreams. Most of the houses were dark, but here and there, a single window glowed with a soft, warm light. Perhaps someone was reading late into the night, like he so often did. Perhaps a parent was sitting with a restless child. Each light was a small beacon of life and warmth in the darkness, a quiet story being lived out behind the glass. Arthur felt a sense of gentle connection to these unseen neighbors, all of them sharing the same quiet night, each in their own small, safe world. He walked past a house with a garden in the front. Even in the dim light, he could make out the skeletal forms of rose bushes, their flowers long gone, their thorny branches reaching up like delicate, dark lace against the sky. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves was strong here. The smell of autumn's slow, graceful decay. It was not a sad smell, but a nostalgic one, full of the promise of rest and the eventual return of spring. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the few remaining leaves in the tall oak trees that lined the street. The sound was like a soft sigh, a whisper passing through the town. He heard the distant, lonely hoot of an owl, a classic sound of the night that made the silence that followed seem even deeper. He pulled his scarf a little tighter, the soft wool a comfort against the chill. His own street was just ahead, Elm Street. It was a quiet street, much like the others, but it was familiar in a way that settled deep in his bones. He knew the crack in the pavement by the corner. He knew the slight lean of the old lamp post at the end of the block. He knew the particular way the branches of the great elm tree, for which the street was named, hung over the sidewalk. These were the small, unremarkable details that composed the map of home. As he turned the corner onto his street, he saw his own small house. It was a simple brick cottage with a dark green door and a small, tidy garden. And in the front window, the one that looked into his cozy living room, a light was on. A soft, welcoming, golden light was spilling out onto the small porch and the path leading to the door. He stopped. He was certain he had not left a light on. His routine upon leaving in the morning was as ingrained as his closing ritual at the library. Lights off, thermostat down, door locked. Always. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of confusion passed through him, but it was not followed by alarm. In a town like this, there was little to fear. The light did not feel intrusive or wrong. It felt welcoming. It looked like a silent invitation. Curiosity quickened his pace. He walked up the short garden path, his footsteps now making a soft crunching sound on the gravel. The light in the window was from his favorite reading lamp, the one that stood next to his comfortable, worn armchair. It cast a warm, steady glow, making the room within look like the coziest place on earth. He reached his front door and pulled his house key from his pocket. It was smaller and simpler than the library key. It felt light in his hand. He slid it into the lock. The door opened with a soft, familiar creak, a sound that always meant he was home, that he was safe. He stepped inside and was greeted by a wave of warmth. The air in the house was not just warm from the heating, but held a different kind of warmth, the kind that comes from recent activity. And there was a smell, a delicious, savory smell of baked bread and something herby, like rosemary and thyme. It was the smell of a home-cooked meal. He closed the door behind him, the latch clicking softly into place. He took off his coat and scarf and hung them on the hook by the door. He walked from the small entryway into his living room. The room was just as he had left it, neat and tidy, with his books arranged neatly on the shelves that lined the walls. The lamp was on, just as he had seen from the street, its soft light fallen on his armchair. And there, on the small wooden table beside the chair, was a tray. On the tray was a plate covered with a clean checkered cloth. Next to the plate was a small handwritten note. Arthur's heart gave a gentle, pleasant lurch. He knew that handwriting. He walked over to the chair and picked up the note. It was from his sister, Clara, who lived on a farm just outside of town. The note was short and simple. "Dearest Arthur," it read, "knew you'd have a long week. Thought you could use a warm supper. I made too much stew as usual. Just heat it up. See you on Sunday. Love, Clara." Arthur stood there for a long moment, holding the note in his hand. He read it again. The simple, kind words warming him more than his coat had. The weariness he had felt earlier, the gentle weight of his solitude, simply lifted. It was as if a window had been opened in his heart, letting in a fresh, warm breeze. He had not realized how much he had needed this simple gesture of care. He lifted the cloth from the plate. Beneath it was a thick slice of her homemade bread, still slightly warm, and a hearty bowl of beef and vegetable stew. The aroma was rich and wonderful. He could see the chunks of carrot and potato, the tender pieces of meat, all swimming in a dark, savory gravy. It was a meal made with love, and he knew it would taste of home. He carried the tray into his small, simple kitchen. He spooned the stew into a saucepan and put it on the stove over a low flame, just to heat it through. As it warmed, the delicious smell filled the small room, a comforting and deeply satisfying aroma. While it heated, he lit the small fire he had laid in the living room fireplace that morning. The kindling caught quickly, and soon a cheerful, crackling fire was dancing in the hearth, its light flickering on the walls and ceiling. He returned to the kitchen, poured the warmed stew back into its bowl, and carried his supper back into the living room. He settled into his favorite armchair, the one with the worn, soft fabric that had molded to his shape over the years. He placed the tray on the table beside him. The fire crackled and popped, a cheerful, domestic sound. The lamplight was soft on the pages of the books that surrounded him. The room was filled with warmth, the scent of the stew, and the faint, pleasant smell of wood smoke. He took his first bite of the stew. It was every bit as good as it had smelled. The vegetables were soft, the meat was tender, and the gravy was rich and flavorful. It was simple, unpretentious food, but it was perfect. It was the taste of his sister's kindness, of family, of being looked after. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling the warmth of the food spread through him, chasing away the last of the evening's chill. He tore off a piece of the bread and dipped it into the gravy, just as he had done since he was a boy. The bread was soft and chewy, and it soaked up the delicious broth perfectly. He looked into the dancing flames of the fire, their light making the shadows in the room sway and dance as if they were alive. The quiet of his house was no longer the silence of solitude, but the silence of peace. It was a comfortable, contented silence full of gratitude. His walk home had been a journey through a quiet and beautiful world. He had found peace in the stillness, in the golden light of the lanterns, in the soft sounds of the sleeping town. But the journey's end was the best part of all. To come home to unexpected warmth, to a thoughtful gift, to the tangible proof that he was cared for. This was a gift beyond measure. When he had finished his meal, he placed the empty bowl back on the tray. He did not feel the need to read as he usually did in the evenings. He was content to simply sit and be. He leaned his head back against the soft cushions of the chair and watched the fire. The flames leapt and curled, a constant, mesmerizing dance of orange and red and yellow. The log in the fireplace shifted, sending up a shower of bright golden sparks that disappeared up the chimney like a flurry of fireflies. He thought about his sister, Clara, out on her farm. He pictured her in her own warm kitchen, the heart of her bustling family home. He felt a deep, abiding love for her generous and practical spirit. Her small act of kindness had completely transformed his evening, turning it from a simple, solitary night into something special. It had reminded him that even in his quiet life, he was not alone. He was connected. He was loved. The grandfather clock in the library had marked the end of his workday. The town hall clock had marked the time on his journey. Now, the small mantel clock in his own living room began to chime the hour of 8. Its chimes were much softer, more delicate than the others, a sweet, silvery sound that seemed perfectly suited to the cozy room. He listened to all 8 chimes, each one a tiny, perfect note in the quiet symphony of his home. He felt a pleasant drowsiness begin to steal over him. It was the satisfying tiredness that comes after a good meal and a long walk in the cool air. His body felt heavy and relaxed in the chair. His eyelids felt heavy. The fire was so warm, the chair was so soft, the house was so quiet and safe. He knew he should probably get up and prepare for bed. But for now, this moment was too perfect to disturb. He closed his eyes just for a moment. He could still hear the gentle crackle of the fire and the soft ticking of the mantel clock. He could feel the warmth on his face. In his mind, he retraced the steps of his walk home. He saw the golden lantern light on the cobblestones, the dark reflections in the shop windows, the silent, watchful cat. He saw the shimmering lights on the surface of the river, dancing on the current. Each image was peaceful, gentle, and clear. His walk had been a meditation, a slow, quiet process of letting go of the day and coming back to himself. And his home, which had been waiting for him all along, had welcomed him with an unexpected gift of warmth and love. He felt a profound sense of contentment, a deep and quiet joy that settled in his heart like a soft, warm light. His breathing grew slow and even, falling into the natural rhythm of sleep. The thoughts of his day, of his walk, of his sister's kindness, all began to merge and soften, drifting away like clouds passing through a starlit sky. He was safe. He was warm. He was home. And as the fire in the hearth burned down to glowing, gentle embers, Arthur drifted into a deep and peaceful sleep. His dreams filled with the soft, golden light of 1,000 quiet lanterns. The house settled around him, a silent guardian in the night. The mantel clock continued its steady, quiet ticking, measuring out the peaceful hours. Outside, the wind whispered through the branches of the old elm tree, a gentle lullaby for the sleeping town. The lanterns on the street kept their silent vigil, casting their warm, steady glow on the empty cobblestones, waiting for the dawn. All was well, all was quiet, all was at peace, and now, my friend, it is time for your own journey to end in the safety and comfort of sleep. Let the story of Arthur's quiet walk home be a gentle guide for your own mind. Let go of your day, just as he did. Feel the warmth and safety of your own bed, your own quiet sanctuary. Know that you are cared for, that you are safe, and that a night of deep, restorative rest is here for you now. There is nothing left to do but to drift away on the gentle tide of sleep. Sweet dream,